Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Anna Fotyga, Polish member of the European Parliament, the ECR political group, and it is my pleasure and privilege to invite you to the very important, timely and topical webinar we offered this afternoon. The title is the South Caucasus and the West, the whys and hows of the EU-US stronger engagement in the region. When I look to our activities in the domain of security and defense, foreign affairs, within the European Parliament, to all debates, I think that most popular outcome is the appeal for greater engagement of the EU in the region, support to states, three states, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, and societies of those states, tending to regional security and to better connectivity. I wouldn't deny many times we are concerned, and we also see absolutely necessity to greater joint engagement, transatlantic, between EU and our transatlantic partners, US and of course Canada. But today we discuss views, issues of how to enhance the peaceful development of the region. Allow me first to invite our keynote speaker, the EU Commissioner for Neighbourhood and Enlargement, Mr. Oliver Varhelyi, who briefs us on the situation in the region, on the EU engagement. Then we'll have time for presentations of panelists. I will introduce them one by one, and then eventual engagement with Commissioner. Commissioner, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fotyga. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you today. I do regret, however, that this is only a video conference, but let's try to make the most out of it still. So, dear participants, I think it is very timely to discuss our engagement towards the South Caucasus, especially how we could build a common engagement with our US friends. As we have seen last year, the escalation of the conflict over the Nagorno-Karabakh region, with a very heavy loss of lives on both sides, has shaken the entire Caucasus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and also Georgia. The EU has been quick to provide almost 7 million euros in humanitarian assistance. Moreover, we are preparing an additional 10 million euros to mitigate the impact of this conflict. The Nagorno-Karabakh ceasefire is, however, still fragile. Rebuilding homes and lives will take time, but confidence building will take even longer, and it is essential to a lasting peace to get there. Therefore, the EU fully supports the work of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs, including the US, to rebuild confidence and find a way towards a lasting solution and sustainable peace in the region. In last year's joint communication on the future of the Eastern Partnership, we were clear that the EU will step up its efforts to address the unresolved conflicts across the region. As co-chairs of the Geneva international discussions, we are committed to territorial integrity of Georgia. The work of the EU Special Representative to the South Caucasus is vital in all three countries, and therefore I'm very happy to have here Toivo Klar today. I'm very eager to listen to him, what he has got to report to us. We are now launching a very ambitious 15 million euro EU for Dialogue program to help citizens affected by the unresolved and bloody conflicts across the region. We welcome the commitment of the new US administration to engage in this region. The US and the EU act along similar lines. We share a similar vision. Security and stability are the foundations of prosperity. We cooperate already to strengthen the region's resilience, particularly on governance and rule of law in Armenia and Georgia, and on economic diversification and civil society support in Azerbaijan. Stepping up EU-US cooperation now will contribute and can contribute to building long-term resilience and improving conditions for people and communities on the ground. Looking to the future for the South Caucasus region, let me focus on three key issues: recovery, resilience, and reform. First, on recovery. The COVID-19 pandemic has hit the region hard. The EU has been quick to react and show solidarity with our partners. We are providing key medical supplies, saving thousands of lives, and providing budget support, macrofinancial assistance, and support to SMEs and to the most vulnerable. We're working to deliver vaccines to essential medical workers and vulnerable groups across the Eastern Partnership countries. Last week, over 20,000 vaccines from Romania were delivered to Moldova through Team Europe, and the first deliveries through COVAX, in which both the EU and the US have substantially invested. Through EU vaccine sharing, we aim to deliver vaccines also across the South Caucasus, while supporting them now already in vaccine preparedness and deployment. The recovery starts with the economy. Our aim is to create jobs and growth, meeting citizens' expectations, reducing inequalities, and making partner countries places where people want to build their futures. The EU is the biggest trading partner for Azerbaijan and Georgia, and second biggest for Armenia. Between 2016 and 2019, EU trade has increased by 40% with Azerbaijan, 27% with Armenia, and 12% with Georgia. Growth potential is particularly promising for small and medium-sized enterprises, which are also key for generating employment and innovation. In 2019, EU for Business supported over 50,000 SMEs in the three countries, generating an additional 570 million euros in income and 40,000 new jobs. Strong connectivity is vital to boost long-term growth prospects. We would welcome enhanced EU-US cooperation to invest in sustainable, rules-based, secure and inclusive connectivity, bringing new trade routes towards Europe and growth and jobs with it. Working closely with the World Bank, we are already upgrading and building trans-European networks in transport. Our 10T investment action plan foresees 12.8 billion euros of priority investments by 2030. Secondly, on resilience, our President von der Leyen and US President Biden share a commitment to build back better for a green, digital, just and resilient recovery from the crisis. Supporting energy security, the Southern Gas Corridor has been finalized and deliveries of natural gas from Azerbaijan to the European Union have begun. Moreover, discussions are ongoing on its prolongation to the Western Balkans to ensure natural gas supplies as part of a green energy transition also in that region. The US is our close partner in the Eastern Europe Energy Efficiency and Environment Partnership, which has provided over 164 million euros in investment grants, leveraging a total investment of almost 1.2 billion euros in energy efficiency and providing clear results from the blue trolleybuses in Tbilisi to the street lighting in Yerevan. We are investing in a resilient digital economy and society, supporting digital innovation, digital skills, and creating high-quality jobs. And thirdly, to sustain the recovery and strengthen resilience, we also need to invest in reforms. where the EU and US have historically worked very closely together. Rule of law and justice reforms are essential to give people and businesses the confidence and security they need. This will remain high on our agenda. In view of the recent developments in Armenia and Georgia, it is therefore particularly important to ensure respect by all of the principles and processes of democracy. We are also investing in fair and inclusive societies, increasing our outreach to smaller local organizations. We have already joined forces with our US partners to support bottom-up civil society engagement, regional cooperation in the region, and to address unresolved conflicts and support the people most affected by it. Investing in people is key to preparing for the future and fostering societal and economic resilience. We are therefore supporting youth employment, entrepreneurship, and skills development. The aim is to make youth more competitive and to help them find high-quality jobs in the region. Moreover, we are supporting young people's participation in policymaking. In conclusion, different as they are, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia share many common challenges. Strengthening their resilience, maximizing the opportunities of the digital and green transition, and working towards an inclusive, democratic, stable, and prosperous region. Our common aim is clear. Together, we will continue to bring tangible benefits to all citizens in the region. We are ready to work together with the US to help build confidence and find a long-lasting solution to the unresolved conflicts in the Southern Caucasus. Thank you very much for your attention.
Commissioner, thank you very much indeed for your introductory words. I owe you and our viewers, panelists as well, two pieces of housekeeping information. First is about Toivo Klar. I would like to apologize on behalf of Ambassador Toivo Klar, who is the EU special representative to Southern Caucasus and to resolve the conflict in Georgia, also very, very important task. But he is in the region, actually this moment in Baku in Azerbaijan, and currently meeting with President Aliyev. So please accept his apologies. Surely we'll listen to his statements later, and it will be follow-up to this. And second piece of information is about Dr. Amanda Paul, who unfortunately is ill, hopefully just ordinary flu, so we wish her really well for cooperation also with us in future. But now allow me to introduce or start introducing our very distinguished panel. And first is Ambassador Matthew Bryza. The person who is actually legendary for not only for Southern Caucasus, but to broader region, in particular to Central and Eastern Europe. He used to serve for 23 years, as far as I remember, as US diplomat. The highest rank, of course, in diplomacy usually is the ambassador, and certainly Ambassador Bryza served as ambassador to Baku, to US ambassador to Azerbaijan. Also, and I remember him as deputy assistant secretary of state, US secretary of state. His knowledge of Southern Caucasus, of broader region, in particular energy security, is so important to all of us. We count very much indeed on your remarks, Ambassador. Floor is yours.
Oh, wow. Madam Minister, if I may, dziękuję serdecznie. It is a huge honor to be here with you, with Commissioner Vaheli as well, and my fellow panelists, who are some of the people I respect more than anybody thinking about this in part of the world. I'd like to go back to what Commissioner Vaheli said in the very beginning, that one goal today is to examine how the US and EU, or EU and US, can work together, or continue working together in the South Caucasus. And I have to say that the partnership that I enjoyed with Peter Semneby at the time, and with so many other senior EU officials when I was either mediating or trying to mediate the Abkhazia and South Ossetia disputes, or being the Minsk Group co-chair, it was really a great way to make our views clear, to bring our leverage to bear, and to bring the incentives to bear as well. And Peter Semneby and I were so close that he actually was a guest at my wedding, and we would have joint meetings very often with all the political parties in Tbilisi when there were crises, as well as when the war was underway. So I think, obviously we're at a huge inflection point when it comes to the South Caucasus in the transatlantic context. Yes, of course, we have a new president, and one that, thank goodness, is a transatlanticist at heart. Someone for whom NATO is the starting point for US policy, who deeply understands and values how important that transatlantic bond is. But it's also a point of inflection for the reasons the commissioner was just raising. So just offer a couple of observations and suggestions on how we might want to structure our cooperation going forward. Maybe first in Georgia, because I think in Georgia, we face a task that's different from what we face with regard to Azerbaijan and Armenia. In Georgia, I think we can do a lot to help reduce the polarization, at least is in the way it's acted out every day, and to de-escalate the current crisis. And the appointment of Christian Danielson as the mediator is fantastic. President Michel's visit was extremely helpful, it seems to me, in getting a list of 6 points on which the opposition and the government will negotiate. I think, knowing Christian Danielson from the time way back, I guess in 2007 or so, when he headed the unit that was overseeing Turkey's EU accession aspirations. By the way, I'm sitting in Turkey. I'm in Istanbul right now. I got to know him to be an extremely sharp, fair, interested, which is really interesting. I mean, really important. He really cared about the issues. Diplomat. And I think that those are the qualities that are going to be really necessary right now to bring both sides back off the brink in Georgia. Georgians and all the Georgians who are watching, Ziad and others, they have a tendency to go to the brink and usually not fall off the edge, but to get pretty close. And so they've been there right on the edge. What the government did in storming the UNM political headquarters and arresting Nico Milia, the head of the opposition, that is a huge and unacceptable escalation. And I think all of us here today agree he must be released from prison, and those sorts of actions have to stop if we're ever going to see progress reinvigorated on Georgia's rebuilding or strengthening its democratic institutions. And so the balance we need to strike is to convey that message unambiguously to the government of Georgia, even as we all continue to admire, even love Georgia, and want it to join the transatlantic family more deeply. I believe as a member of NATO, it should be in NATO because it's qualified. EU is a different story. That's your business in the EU, not mine. But we need to convey that tough message. But we have to, I think, be careful not to be instrumentalized either by the government's opponents. They people that are some of my best friends, but they have a tendency to hope that the transatlantic big institutions, the EU and the US, are going to be like the cavalry riding over the hills to rescue them in a moment of crisis, and to lean in and sort of tip the scales in their favor, in this case, against the Georgian dream. And I think we have to prevent ourselves from being drawn into that. And the EU Representative Halsel, US Ambassador Degnan, they've been great at that. They've been very active in trying to broker a way forward, an agreement on electoral reform, judicial reform, all the things that that Charles Michel's 6 points cover. But yeah, the OSCE, the EU, and the US, they all said those elections were flawed, but fundamentally were competitive, and therefore reflected the intent of the voters of Georgia. So whether or not that was a good decision, that's what's out there. And unless that changes, I've been trying to urge my friends in the opposition, you need to find a way to negotiate a way forward with the government to get to work. Take up your mandates, represent the people who voted for you, even if it seems the government stole the election, if you believe that, because your closest friends in the transatlantic family are not saying that. So we all then, therefore, on this call, we have to avoid being instrumentalized, even as we are unambiguously supporting democracy and the Georgian people's aspirations for deeper inclusion and integration into the transatlantic community. Balance. When it comes to, and I'm just about done here, Azerbaijan and Armenia, the challenge is different. The challenge for us now is to be present. Yes, all of those programs that the commissioner described are essential for the midterm, for getting these societies to be healthy, to come closer to us. But the truth is, at a strategic level, we're not present like we were. In July, we all recall that there were those military clashes along the Azerbaijani-Armenian border. And neither the US nor the EU nor the Minsk group were particularly active. The Minsk group, its mandate is the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, which is inside Azerbaijan's territory. The Minsk group's mandate doesn't cover the border of Armenia and Azerbaijan. And so if you look back, there was no engagement by the Minsk group when those very important events were transpiring. I mean, military clashes, heavy artillery along the Azerbaijan-Armenia border. After those clashes, Russia called snap military exercises on the territory of Armenia with Armenian forces, using Russian troops at the Russian base, the 102nd Army base in Gyumri, Armenia. Turkey followed, calling snap military exercises with the Azerbaijani military. And to me, that didn't only symbolize, that operationalized the fact that Russia and Turkey were filling a vacuum. A security vacuum or a diplomatic vacuum. And, we see as the second Nagorno-Karabakh war played out, of course, they played the decisive roles. Turkey, with its innovative technologies and tactics that enabled or helped the Azerbaijani military to win a quick and decisive victory. And then Russia being the one that brokered the agreement, being the one that brokered the final deal. Obviously, we know this has kicked off a political crisis in Armenia. Existential maybe for Nikolai Pashinyan, although he is playing his weak hand of cards extremely cleverly. But I think that, hopefully if and when there are new elections, early elections in Armenia, if he doesn't win, I think Vladimir Putin will be unhappy. Whereas Putin is no fan of Pashinyan because of the way Pashinyan came to power, street protests, he's pro-reform, pro-Western. Now that Putin brokered the ceasefire statement of November 9 and 10, Pashinyan then is the vessel to keep that agreement from being torn up after a new election. So it's a very interesting, complicated dynamic. The Minsk group, I think, is hamstrung because France, with all due respect to the people from our great NATO ally on the call, chose sides very clearly on November 10th and said, essentially, we're on Armenia's side. And that's going to make it very difficult for France to gain the credibility as a Minsk group negotiator that's impartial going forward. So I have long believed that EU should be the third Minsk group member. I know that I can imagine there are all kinds of operational and other difficulties to make that happen. But the EU has that heft to be there, along with Russia and the United States. I understand that may never happen, but right now it's difficult, I think, for the Minsk group to function in its current composition and do its job. And its job, final point looking forward, is to deal with and resolve issues of prisoners of war, do everything it can to get the new corridors open. It's such a positive, tectonic, geopolitical and geoeconomic shift if Turkey-Armenia relations can normalize. And if the new corridor that could connect Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan could be actualized. But without our joint support, active support, and looking at making sure Russia's peacekeepers don't get up to no good, as happened in South Ossetia and in Abkhazia. And if we aren't leaning in to help Armenia resolve its own political crisis, I fear that the opportunities that are presented by the November 9/10 agreement may never be realized, and that corridor, the new corridor, will be for naught. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for those interesting and important remarks. Of course, all of us, we monitor closely situation, including security situation in South Caucasus. But without much ado, I'd like to introduce our second excellent panelist, Dr. Luke Coffey, who is probably extremely good example of transatlantic link, because he was very closely involved in European affairs once UK was the EU member state, and also serving very close in a variety of advisory capacities to both the US Department of Defense and Secretary for Defense, as well as to the White House, to National Security Council. Now, Dr. Luke Coffey is the outstanding expert in the Heritage Foundation, holding the Ellison Church chair in this foundation, or leading the center. I would like to give the floor to Dr. Luke Coffey. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank you and the ECR group for inviting me to speak today. It's an honor and a pleasure. And to see also so many familiar faces and friends that are also on the panel. It's great to see all of us here together. I think it's very important that you decided to bring both sides of the Atlantic together to talk about this issue, because many of the challenges that we face in the South Caucasus can only be, these challenges can only be overcome and met by working together, by Americans and Europeans working together in the region. Now, in terms of the United States, we are not a South Caucasus country, but we need to behave more like a South Caucasus power because of our economic and political and security and military connections we have to the region, because of other different connections to the broader region. So this region is very important to the United States. Now, I would like to just highlight three areas where I think the U.S. and also the U.S. and our European partners can work more closely together in the region. And then I'm going to do a quick rapid fire about each country where I think relations are going with the U.S. and Europe, and what more can be done. So the first area that I think, the first thing I think the United States could do in the region is to show up. Yes, Georgia has received some high-level visits over the years. Of course, the Secretary Pompeo visited in November, but the purpose of this visit was not quite clear. There wasn't any deliverable during this visit, but nevertheless, anytime the U.S. Secretary of State shows up to your country, and if you're a friend to the United States, that's generally a good thing. But the last time a cabinet secretary has visited either Yerevan or Baku was when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State in 2012. Of course, John Bolton visited as National Security Advisor in 2018, but this is too long. If the U.S. wants to look at the emergence of big power competition seriously, if we want to be a serious country when it comes to these big global challenges, we have to demonstrate that we take a region like the South Caucasus seriously. And a very easy way to do this, and a way to earn a lot of goodwill, is to simply show up. So that's my first recommendation, is to show up. Secondly, we need to look at how Europe and the US can cooperate together on the energy front in the region. The Southern Gas Corridor, which came online, the first natural gas arrived to Europe the end of December, was a major energy infrastructure project that was completed on time and below budget. It was a rare example of good geopolitical news for 2020, I believe. And the US and Europe need to work together on how to look at the next steps. Now, there's a lot of debate about Nord Stream 2. I hope that the Biden administration will continue on from the Trump administration's pressure, working with our European allies to halt, delay, if not stop altogether, Nord Stream 2. I think in the long run, it only harms Europe's energy security, especially when there are better options when you look south. And of course, the Southern Gas Corridor is one option. Building the proper interconnectors to better connect, especially the Balkans and other parts of Southern Europe, to the Southern Gas Corridor is another alternative. But also, Europe and the United States should work closely together to give strong diplomatic signals and maybe even economic and financial signals in terms of supporting a Trans-Caspian gas pipeline. If we could get Central Asian gas to Europe under the Caspian through as part of the Southern Gas Corridor, I think that this could bring huge benefits to Europe's overall energy security and definitely reduce its dependency on Russian energy. Now, I'm fully aware of all the challenges and complications of a Trans-Caspian gas pipeline. I've written myself extensively on this matter, and we can discuss this in more detail during the Q&A, so I'm not going into this naively. But I do think if we had the same level of U.S. involvement and the same level of U.S. support for such a project now that we did in the 1990s with BTC, for example, or even with Southern Gas Corridor, we could really drive some momentum for this project. So the second area, as I just highlighted, is U.S.-European cooperation on energy security, where the South Caucasus plays a key role. Finally, the U.S. and Europe should work closely together on finding ways to help build the peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We need to find ways to encourage confidence building. We need to find ways to encourage economic cooperation, economic engagement between the two sides. We need to factor in Georgia into this. We need to factor Turkey into this as well. I cannot imagine how many, perhaps billions of dollars of foreign direct investment have been denied to the region, denied to the South Caucasus because of this conflict in the past. And now we have this opportunity to try to build on the peace that does exist. And the US and Europe needs to work together to find ways to help encourage economic cooperation and expand economic cooperation and help build this peace into a more enduring peace. Now, those are kind of like the three areas that the three recommendations I have. In terms of where each country is and how the U.S., I think, should view it in the region, well, with Georgia, obviously there are a lot of domestic problems and political problems in Georgia right now. To me, this is part of a process of establishing good governance and a path towards democracy. As long as Georgia is heading in the right direction, it's going to have some ups and downs. Every democracy has this. Look, here in the United States, look at the events of January the 6th, right? Every democracy has ups and downs. But as long as Georgia is heading in the right direction, the United States, working with Europe, needs to help Georgia along its Euro-Atlantic path, along its Euro-Atlantic journey. And when I talk about the first thing to do is to show up to the region, I think it'd be great if Secretary Blinken hopped on an airplane and flew to Tbilisi to help, both sides try to come to some sort of compromise and agreement that can get, things back on track in Georgia. But in the meantime, we can't lose focus of the bigger picture. Georgia is firmly on the path to NATO. The United States needs to help Georgia along that path and remain committed to that U.S.-Georgia relationship. As it pertains to Azerbaijan, I think the United States needs to, many of our policymakers need to crack open an atlas and forget the bureaucratic divisions that exist inside the State Department or the DoD or even on the National Security Council, where you have one bureau focusing on Central Asia, a completely separate bureau focusing on Europe, and another bureau looking at the Middle East and the greater Middle East. The Caspian region and Azerbaijan is where all three of these administrative bureaucratic divisions converge. And we need a way to look over these internal bureaucratic barriers. And we need to improve and build upon our relationship with Azerbaijan as a way to serve as a gateway to Central Asia for the United States. If you read a year ago now, the U.S. Central Asia strategy, it talked a lot about improving and bolstering U.S. economic activity in the region in Central Asia. Stability and security in Central Asia will have a spillover effect onto Afghanistan. But how do you get to Central Asia from a U.S. point of view? That's through our good relationship with Azerbaijan. And with Armenia, I think it's important that the United States remains supportive where it can and patient with Armenia. Armenia is going through a very difficult time domestically as well. My friend Matt has already highlighted the problems, being faced, especially with Prime Minister Pashinyan. And the United States should always make sure that door is open for Armenia's future Euro-Atlantic path. And Armenia is sort of torn now between, closer ties and dependency on Russia in the aftermath of the Second Karabakh War. And I think a younger generation and some of the, political elite who would like to have closer relations with Europe and the United States. So the challenge for the United States right now is to go into the relationship with eyes wide open. Armenia does have a very cozy and close relationship with Iran, has a very close and cozy relationship with Russia. But there are certain factions that want to see it closer to Brussels and to Washington. So we need to keep that door open and be patient and work with Armenia along this journey. So I'll stop there and hand it back over to you. Thank you again for inviting me to speak here today.
Thank you very much indeed. And now I would like to introduce extremely important person, the former U.S. Army Commander Europe, retired Lieutenant, sorry for this English pronunciation, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, very, very much engaged in security issues, and I know that how much he supports the path to Euro-Atlantic future for countries like Georgia. Sir, floor is yours.
Dear Anna, thank you for the privilege, and you set such a wonderful example of international leadership yourself, the way you convene events like this and help keep people think strategically. So thank you for your leadership and for the privilege. I also am thrilled to be on the same panel with our legendary diplomat, Matt Bryza, the legend. He's our very own Prince Metternich for the South Caucasus, perhaps. So look, both Matt and my old friend Luke Coffey have laid out so many good recommendations already, and so I want to associate myself with each of the positive things they said, and then add 2 or 3 points. First of all, of course, what's missing for the United States, and I think probably for the European Union, is a strategy for the Black Sea region. Luke's exactly right. We need to pull out our geography books, look at the map, and usually the Black Sea and the South Caucasus are right at the bottom right-hand corner of the map that most Europeans and certainly most Americans use. So you have to kind of move, when you move the Black Sea up into the middle of the map, then it changes how you think about the economic potential of the east-west corridor that goes right through the South Caucasus. And unfortunately now, because we have not had a strategy for the region, you now have Russian peacekeepers in Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And that's because they stepped in and filled a vacuum that we left. Not that we haven't had great ambassadors and diplomats in the region, but in terms of a regional strategy, that's what's been missing. I am encouraged that the Biden administration has made sovereignty of Ukraine a priority. President Biden said that when he had his first phone call with President Putin, said Ukrainian sovereignty is a priority. That got my attention. And if they're serious about it, that means they will have to develop a Black Sea strategy, because Ukraine is not an island. It's part of that region. And so I think that bodes well for doing what Luke says, which is being there and making sure that senior administration officials, congressional delegations, as well as military and others are in the South Caucasus. But we have got to compete better economically. And I've learned a lot from Matt and Luke about the economic potential there. When I first met the president of Georgia back in 2015, I think, or 2014, I said, Mr. President, what kind of country is Georgia? How do you see yourself? And he immediately said, we are an Eastern European country that should be the portal between Europe and Eurasia. And that really stuck with me. And of course, that means you've got to have infrastructure to be the portal. Infrastructure like rail and deep water ports like Anaklia, which hopefully one day will actually come into being, so that all of the economic potential from Eurasia can move through this portal over into Europe. And then Romania, Bulgaria, Ukraine would benefit so much as well. There would be more pressure to develop the Danube River as an artery if Georgia becomes that portal. And then you get Western European businesses and American businesses and Canadian and British businesses investing in the region. Right now, to be candid, there are very, very few major European and American businesses that have significant investment in Georgia, Armenia, or Azerbaijan. And if there's no business there, then to be quite candid, there's little interest or incentive for the parliaments or the Congress to pay attention, for the governments to pay attention. Matt's exactly right. France has forfeited its, it is clearly biased in this case in the region. Germany, I don't know where they are. They're totally absent. And these are the two countries that need to be helping to address these issues. And certainly the Biden administration is going to be looking for European partners to do big stuff. President Biden said that the day he took office on January the 20th, talked about the need for allies. Well, that means when he puts his hand out to say, hey, let's work together, Berlin and Paris and Brussels have got to reach back, and they have got to be a part of this. Let me close with saying it is so important that the United States gets its relationship with Turkey correct also, because Turkey obviously is such an important country in the region. It's a leader in the region for historical reasons, economic reasons, and geographical reasons. And right now it is doing nobody any good for the United States and Turkey to have such a poor relationship. And we have to think long-term. Regimes change, geography does not change. And I hope the Biden administration and the U.S. Congress will insist on fixing this relationship. Thank you, dear Anna.
Thank you very much indeed. Fascinating, and I think that we have to think it over. It's an excellent statement. Thank you. Now I would like to introduce two outstanding experts of the region, and first is Mr. Richard Giragosian, who is really renowned for his expertise both on regional issues, both delivered to general public through media, variety of media, and also to institutions. Just to name, I will start, it's pro domo sua. First is the EU delegation to Erevan, then OSCE, US Department of State, and also it is lecturing in Warsaw-based Natolin Center, European Center. So without much ado, sir, floor is yours. But please, I kindly ask both our experts, also Tornike Gordadze, to keep the time limit, as we want another round. Please, floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon. One special advantage I have of going toward the end is much of the important things were already said. I'm going to be brief, but based on the unanimous position of all of us, the strategic necessity for, I would say, re-engagement in the South Caucasus, based on a very new geopolitical reality, and following the commissioner's format. First, in terms of recovery. The pressing challenge is very much post-war stability operations, making a ceasefire into a permanent negotiated peace. What's required in recovery is the urgency of the return of all prisoners of war and civilian hostages still in Azerbaijani captivity to overcome the state of war. At the same time, there's an urgency and a necessity for a return to diplomacy. The 6-week war for Nagorno-Karabakh was halted by a unilateral Russian deployment of military peacekeepers. As important as that was, we no longer need a unilateral Russian projection of power. We need a multilateral diplomatic projection of power. And in this context, we need to address and resolve areas of uncertainty, of insecurity, in terms of returning to diplomacy to make the ceasefire much more lasting and durable. And the specifics, the rules and terms of engagement in terms of the EU and US coming back should be based on a rather unprecedented convergence of interests in post-stability operations. And second, beyond recovery, resilience. In terms of resilience, the key is democratization, much less promoting democracy and much more protecting democratic institutions. Georgia and Armenia has witnessed a period of democracy being challenged, imperiled, and even questioned, because a dangerous precedent from the war for Nagorno-Karabakh was the risky vindication of authoritarian regimes with the loss of democratic Armenia. This should be challenged in terms of investing more in democratic institutions. And in this regard, joining the EU, joining NATO are not necessarily the answer to all the problems facing Georgia and other countries. We need much more of investing in resiliency based less on individual Democrats and much more relying on democratic institutions. At the same time, The Eastern Partnership is one such important program that demonstrates the need to elevate the discourse to a region approach based on differentiation, but addressing and resolving the needs and challenges of these unique countries. At the same time, the use of force to resolve a political crisis is unacceptable. And we do need the return to diplomacy also to vindicate and reaffirm the values and ideals of the West. And third, most important, beyond recovery, beyond resiliency, is the need for reform in terms of addressing and incorporating and harnessing the important new difference, the economic incentive of the restoration of all regional trade and transport. It will be the avenue to overcome isolation and exclusion. At the same time, it will provide a degree of connectivity where transit states come to define the region much more than closed borders and isolation have in the past. And finally, in conclusion, it's most important in conclusion to note that there is no conclusion. This is very much a dynamic, not static process. But all the more important is the necessity for EU and US re-engagement in this critical region of the South Caucasus. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. And now, last but not least, absolutely in terms of first presentation of the panel, I would like to introduce Dr. Tornike Gordadze, well known already in the European Parliament for his excellent expertise. Dr. Gordadze used to be the state secretary in the government of Georgia, also chief negotiator of the association, Georgia's association agreement with the EU. So without much ado, I'm sorry, I would like to use more time for introductions. Bios are there. Dr. Gordadze, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I join my thanks for to the organizers for organizing this very timely and I would say urgent meeting about the South Caucasus. And I would, together with what Richard said, the emergency of the situation in the region. We have seen this 6 weeks war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which ended with even more reduction of the Western influence in the region, and Russia and Turkey augmenting their influence in the region. And what we see in Georgia is also pretty worrisome. The tendencies are not very good in terms of democratization and Georgia's path towards Euro-Atlantic agencies like the European Union and NATO. Why I'm saying that? Because I will more concentrate on Georgia because as we're limited in time, but I would be happy to answer questions also on Armenia and Azerbaijan. I would just wanted to start with a quotation, and I'm not going to ask you whose phrase I'm quoting. It's the phrase of the former president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, who declared in 2011 that Ukraine will never renounce the objective of European integration and the ambition to become member of the EU. And now, 10 years later, we see, and even few years later, this statement of Mr. Yanukovych, we saw where Ukraine went, and it was prevented by the Maidan revolution. So I would put a parallel with Georgia, where we're facing a kind of I would say boiling frog syndrome that started already several years ago, and now it's accelerated since the last elections that are not recognized by the opposition. As my friend and colleague and very esteemed colleague, Bryza said, these elections are considered as being unfair and unfree by the opposition, but he said, yeah, there are different opinions about this, but these elections should be compared not to the elections of Belarus and Russia, but to the elections of those countries who want integration with the Europe. And that's why these elections cannot be considered as free and at least not fair, maybe more free than in Belarus and Russia, but certainly not fair. And we should be more ambitious in the case of Georgia, where the West, European Union, the US invested a lot. And what we see now is really a very dangerous path towards the authoritarianism. Many experts in the West are discussing, another friend, Luke Coffey, said, yeah, there are ups and downs in democracies, but we have seen many downs in the region, but not many ups. I don't have many examples of ups in terms of democratization in Georgia last few years, or even more last few months after this contested election. So the situation is very urgent because we see at the same time the situation is not neutral. So the Russia is gaining influence. Russia is becoming more and more influential in Georgia in terms of soft power, economically also. I've listened to the figures told by the commissioner, where Georgia's trade with the European Union increased only by 12% after the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement was signed, which is not a big evolution compared especially to Moldova and Ukraine. And the part of Russia in Georgia's external trade has augmented much more dramatically. And we see Russia's influence, as I said, Russian brokered NGOs and some radical groups are more and more mobilized in the country. Also, we have heard a very worrisome declaration of the head of the Russian foreign intelligence, Mr. Narishkin, just 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken, where he stated Russia's position in Georgia's political crisis, and it was a warning against the West for not intervening to help the opposition in this political crisis, which is a very worrisome signal coming from Russia. The question we are asking in this panel is why and how we should help the region. First, why, and I'm taking again the example of Georgia, is because Georgian opinion and Georgian public opinion is pro-European and pro-Western. So they're 80% or even more in all opinion polls of Georgian public opinion is pro-Western and pro-European. So not helping this country staying in, keeping its European path would be a mistake, and it would be a very grave mistake. Again, Russia and US and Europe have invested a lot in the last 20-25 years in democratization of these countries, and especially in Georgia. I would remind you that Georgia, together with Armenia and Israel, was among these three countries receiving the highest US financial aid per capita. And again, European Union has spent something like 3 billion euros in the last 20 years to help Georgia's economic development, but also Georgia's democratic development. And Georgia is the last country now, after the war in Karabakh, which is still under engaged in its integration towards European Union and NATO. And we should not abandon this country and let Russia's influence growing. Georgia is what we could call in this European jargon a low-hanging fruit, because European influence is very big there still, and American influence is still very big. So compared to Belarus and Russia, the things can be reversed. These bad tendencies can be reversed in Georgia, and we're very happy to see the level of engagement of the European Union. And we saw the president Charles Michel coming to Georgia, and the appointment of Christian Danielson is an example. So the next meeting between the Georgia's government and the European Union would be is scheduled on 16th of March, and I hope there will be a very fruitful discussion between the European structures, government, and questions that should be answered by the Georgian government For example, why just today that Georgian court, whose independence is less and less evident, and everyone, all the observers now, the justice independent. So the Georgian court made it authorize the prosecutor's office, and I'm finishing, to seize the materials of an independent TV station, which is which is something that very worrisome, and it's clearly not in the sense of Georgia's European values. And I'm not talking about the imprisonment of the head of the main opposition party. To conclude, it's not late. Europeans and Americans have a tremendous influence in Georgia still. Economic, political influence, security-wise, these countries are very important for Georgia's independence and sovereignty. So Georgia is a test case where European and American influence can be demonstrated, and cooperation between the two can be demonstrated, and the result can be easily obtained, especially compared to the countries like Belarus, Russia, etc. So I'm stopping here and be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Before I introduce my colleagues, MEPs present in this webinar, I would like to once more to give the floor to Commissioner Várhelyi. He has to leave, and please, your comments, your reaction to presentations of our distinguished panelists. Sir, floor is yours.
Thank you very much once again. Thank you for this opportunity. And what I take back from this panel is a confirmation of our strategy in the sense of having to reappear and re-engage much more strongly than we have done in the last couple of years in the region and with the region. And this also confirms the approach we have taken to engage with each and every single country to try to contribute to the design of their recovery after the COVID crisis. And it started to bring forward a very open discussion with each and every single one of them. Of course, the region faces not only the need to recover from the pandemic, but also to recover from the Nagorno-Karabakh war. And this is why I want to tell you that we devote utmost attention and priority to bring humanitarian aid to the region. And this could be the groundbreaker through which we can start also design the future and have a stronger role for the EU in designing the future together with the two countries. And for the time being, I received positive reactions both from Armenia and from Azerbaijan. And we are investing also politically, not only economically, to be there with a much stronger role. I also take comfort in the comments from our US friends that we see the best way forward pretty much the same way. So I'm really happy to have that discussion and being able to be here with you. But now, unfortunately, I have to leave. So thank you very much again.
Commissioner, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your presence, your reassuring words, and now allow me to introduce our dear colleagues. We are here over political divisions, and we call ourselves sometimes in the European Parliament usual suspects. So those who strongly stand by countries and societies of Southern Caucasus pushing, encouraging, mediating. All of us have been engaged there for many years, for decades actually, in supporting the in particular for Georgia Euro-Atlantic path, but sovereignty and security for all countries, and in particular their engagement with the European Union. Allow me to start wishing all the best our Lithuanian friends on their Independence Day. And my first speaker is former Prime Minister of Lithuania, Andrius Kubilius, who now serves as co-chair of the Euronest body of both European Parliament representatives and representatives of national parliaments of Eastern Partnership countries. Andrius, floor is yours. I'm sorry, there is something wrong with Andrius Kubilius' connection, so I call on Petras Auštrevičius of Renew Europe Group. Petras, floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you indeed from the very start for your congratulations on our re-establishment of independence 31 years ago. And so Lithuania might be one of the brilliant examples of the country which from the very start had its aspirations, pro-Western aspirations, and we never doubted which course to take. I mean, we had probably some slowdowns, but nevertheless, I mean, we have achieved what we wished, I mean, for ourselves for many, many decades. We didn't have a chance to do it. But now things are different. Thank you for organizing this exchange on South Caucasus situation, especially after the war on Nagorno-Karabakh. And I want to make certain observations. You know, I'm really worried about not just about the agreement which was reached in November, but on the course of implementing this agreement. Frankly, I don't believe that any agreement were on, especially concerning the neighborhood of Russia, any agreement where Russia is a very part, works to the end, or a good expectations of any of those agreements. In opposite, we see many agreements where Russia is taking part, in fact, lead to not to de-escalation, but kind of frozen conflicts at the best, uncertainty, and remaining many unresolved issues. So here probably led me to be very skeptical from very start. And in fact, I mean, no secret. Russia's influence in Southern Caucasus has increased. As sorry to say, for the European Union, and maybe to a certain extent to the West in general, decreased. And even, I mean, taking a look who have negotiated November agreement and who is outspoken for the time of being and active in commenting the overall situation, you can see very clearly, I mean, who is who and what position we see for the time of being. And again, my next probably conclusion from the situation we see now, there is a great deficit of confidence between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Even the hostilities are over. But sorry that the prisoners of war still kept on Azerbaijan side, remaining civilians, again, captive. And again, I mean, overlooking the national rhetorics after the November agreement, I don't see as everything is settled, unfortunately. And probably this agreement is a ceasefire agreement, but far from the peace agreement we wish, I mean, for this region to come finally and to be implemented. And again, I mean, I don't see a great prospect for the time of being for Armenia's and Azerbaijan relations on bilateral basis. Something should be done more. And here probably the West must come with a more proactive position with a certain strategy on both sides, because not only one side should move. Both sides have to move in order to meet and reach a much better agreement. I still hope that Minsk Group, which consists of France, US, and Russia, is still a group. It's not just the Russian domination in this group which predicts a certain outcome for the strategic developments in the region. And Anna, let me to bring something on EU, because EU is a very committed partner for South Caucasus. But again, I recognize some different aspirations of three countries in that region: Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And let's be frank from the very start. So we have associated country as Georgia, which is simply, going through very uneasy political time period for the time of being, and having pretty good economic records what comes to reforms, structural reforms, and achievements. Willing even to submit an application for membership in 2024. This is something what our countries went through, and we know how important this stage might be. But it's not an even record, as previous speakers rightly mentioned, behind Georgia. Armenia is looking for comprehensive and enforced partnership agreement, which must contain not just economic cooperation, but political, better governance, and who knows will be next after that. But with the increased Russian presence and dominance in the region, I have certain doubts for Armenia's strife and even freedom to choose the right speed and way developing Armenia-EU relations. I have certain doubts. And finally, with Azerbaijan, we have a comprehensive partnership agreement. President Aliyev is, put it very straightforward. A couple of days ago, as they are looking for a partnership of equal. Fine. It's good. EU has a great intention to cooperate strategically on energy issues and the rest. On what else we might be equal, for me, remains to be seen. I don't know. Many observers have certain critical remarks about Azerbaijan when it comes to political opposition, and here probably we can't be equal. We have to be even critically engaged on some issues. Secondly, we have to do from EU side to encourage regional cooperation, not just bilateral, but regional cooperation. And here, in fact, I indeed concur with many speakers who said that strategic investments, investment-based projects in infrastructure, trade, economy should be promoted. Probably it might be a good point for building confidence and enlarging this regional cooperation, starting from something with what we can agree for the time of being, because time frame is important as well. And finally, I think the European Union should use political leverage and existing relations with Turkey to ask and to promote Turkish positive contribution to regional security and cooperation, generally speaking, because Turkey's influence is on increase. We saw it after the war, and knowing Turkish ambitions regionally and globally, I think it's time, probably to talk to them on this as well. Anna, here I stop, and I'm looking forward for our further exchange. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Petras. I owe you one piece of information. Petras is an extremely important person in terms of Eastern Partnership issues. He is a rapporteur on the future of Eastern Partnership, and the leading MEP in engagement in the region, not to speak about Afghanistan, of course, Petras. And now allow me to introduce another important person, the deputy of Germany, Greens, political group, Viola von Cramon, Taubadel. She is extremely active in the region, and we cooperate daily on many issues, being in Southern Caucasus, being in Belarus or Ukraine. Viola, with great pleasure, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna, first of all for the invitation, but also for organizing this and trying to focus a little bit more on the region, which absolutely you're right, and all of my colleagues have said that slides a little bit of our screens, unfortunately, while we all know if we leave enough room, especially somebody in the Kremlin will be more than happy to take over even more. And so it's not just about power shifting, but it's also about taking care of development, which should go in another direction than what we have currently seen. Domestically, I think Georgia could do much better, and then Georgia could also lead not only in the region, but at least in the Eastern Partnership. And I do regret the developments in the last weeks and months, and I really hope that Mr. Danielson will succeed in a way so we can see an outcome so soon that the next step are achievable, and then we can also see Georgia as a driving force in the region, as a driving force, as a mediating driving force for Nagorno-Karabakh, for the South Caucasus as such, but also for what the Georgians would like to have, the European aspirations. So after all, I think that we in the European Parliament have made clear very, very often and very outspoken that we ask all political forces in Georgia to behave more reasonable, not to blockade, not to boycott, not to exclude things, but also not to use administrative forces in terms of election to have further advantages. When it comes to the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh and the developments after, I think the European Union was much too absent. I really missed shuttle diplomacy. I really missed continuous engagement from our side, be it the Commission or be it the European, either we as Parliament or be it the European External Action Service. So I hope that we can show now in Georgia that we are able, that we are willing to take over responsibility, but I see we should have a similar track also for Nagorno-Karabakh. And what we have seen now with this very, let's say, blunt behavior of Aliyev, I mean, he is absolutely hard ruling autocrat in his country, and now he has shown that he is ready to take force, but he's also ready not to accept former multilateral structures and institutions. So if he wants to cancel and dismiss the Minsk format, I think it is up to us either to propose something which is new and will be accepted, but it is not possible that he unilaterally takes a stand which is then being accepted by us. So I wish we could be more vocal, active, present, bring our people in, come up with concrete proposals, take people from the region to speak up, but also look for a proper mediation format which is accepted by both sides. I do not want to see the situation where the Russians are taking the political decisions and we finance the build-up, the construction in the region, what is destroyed and what needs to be done. So if EU is just ready to do the humanitarian help and aid, which is necessary, this is, at least from my perspective, not acceptable. We also should play a political role in terms of democratization when it comes to Azerbaijan, because this is what many people in Nagorno-Karabakh are very much afraid of. And also when it comes to political stability in the region in general, and also in Armenia. So therefore, I see that we in this group and many of us work in the same, let's say, in the same field. We very much agree on most of the topics, and it's really fruitful to have colleagues like you. We can rely on each other, and we can show to the people in the South Caucasus that at least we are more than interested in, and we push, let's say, for a different leadership coming from the European Union.
Thank you very much indeed, Viola. Thank you for your contribution. I hear that Andrius Kubilius is still to connect. We wait for just no. I'm sorry. So we know it was difficulty in connection. Then once more we'll return to a panel, but allow me also my own comments. Of course, within this group of MEPs, we are very much concerned about geopolitical shift happening in Southern Caucasus. In this respect, despite huge financial contribution and many ways to assist all three of South Caucasus countries, we see considerably weak presence. Therefore, good to listen about Charles Michel, the president of the council, mediation role in Georgia, trying to facilitate dialogue, return in hopefully to accord of March the 8th of previous year, and that requires freeing of prisoners that I held there, not only Mr. Amelia, that was so much criticized by all of us, but also Georgi Rura and others. There is no better way to facilitate good prospects, really excellent prospects for Georgia, than to return to dialogue. We hope that efforts of Mr. Danielson, Ambassador Danielson, bring fruit, but of course we need also deeper, broader engagement of the US and Canada, by the way, because Canada is also is extremely important partner in the region. We hope for all of this. We hope for benefits that Armenia may see in terms of the 9th point of 9 points ceasefire agreement, greater connectivity, but we look forward to achieve lasting peace, not only temporary ceasefire. And we want engagement with Azerbaijan. We stand by Azerbaijani society, and we would like to see really good prospects for this country as well. I would like now to give the floor once more to our distinguished panelists. Allow me to start, I'm sorry, with regional experts, Tornike Gordadze, so the reverse order, and our Armenian friend as well, and then I will give the floor as well to our American friends. Dr. Gordadze, Tornike, floor is yours.
As I missed there was no sound, so I missed what was the question? Sorry.
Pardon. I'm afraid I would like to focus on future. We've been mentioning Anaklia port, other important investments that may enhance the closer European and Euro-Atlantic direction of Georgia, but of other countries as well. Could you please tell us more about your expectations for changes, in particular in prospects in economic and strategic investment terms?
Yes, so the economic and strategic investments are possible when there is a political stability and when the country's political system is transparent and where it's a clear independence of judiciary and the similar issues. What's unfortunately happened with the Anaklia port, we all witnessed the fact that this project was destroyed by the intervention of the state. I don't know for which reasons. Many analysts argue that was due to the Russian pressure. Many others also considered that there was a political attempt to control the interest groups who were behind this project. So all these discussions about the future role of Europe and the United States in this region are almost always connected with political issues and the rule of law and the issues of development of democracy in this country. That's why I started my intervention. I said that I'm not saying that Georgian current government is under Russian orders. Okay, I don't have the direct evidence of that. But what is going on? So all these attempts against democracy and destroying democratic institutions, sooner or later, will bring Georgia under Russian influence, because all authoritarian states in the region and beyond, even in Latin America or Asia, etc., are getting closer to Russia. Russia is supporting this. There is a huge battle on values, on political issues, where Russia represents one side and the European Union and the US are representing the other side. So if Georgia continues this movement and this sliding towards the authoritarianism, it will only benefit Russia in every aspect, political aspect, economic aspect, etc. So the support from the European Union, the US, of democratic institutions is just the basis. Without this, I don't see any interest of investing and spending billions and billions in infrastructure projects. In the 90s, this big issue of the exportation of Caspian oil and gas through the region was a very important step forward, and it raised the interest of the region in the West. But now, in order to keep the interest in these countries, we should support the democratization of Georgia, of Armenia, and also of Azerbaijan.
Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Giragosian, when we look forward and try to find the most positive solution for Armenian society, what kind of investments you indicate? What is necessary? Very difficult social situation as well, and there are divisions within after outbreak of the 6 weeks war and also signing of ceasefire and aftermath. But what can be elaborated in support of EU and US?
Well, that's a very good question, but I do think it's fair to say this is very much a region at risk. Even well before the war for Nagorno-Karabakh, each of the 3 countries of the region were already in war, at war against the coronavirus. And in many ways, none of these countries are adequately prepared for the challenge of the economic recovery from COVID-19. It tends to exacerbate income disparities, differences in divisions of wealth and income. These all need to be addressed, combined with greater investment in institutional democracy. And in this regard, frankly, I'm worried. The status quo does not look good. And in terms of the new geopolitical map, the danger of accepting or legitimizing Russia's power projection, where in many ways Armenia is ever more firmly within the Russian orbit. We also see Russia as the only winner from a tenuous, fragile post-war situation. And even the Russian-imposed ceasefire agreement does little to resolve the underlying political Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. This is why the return to diplomacy is so important. But at the same time, all politics is local. It depends much more on local politics and economics in each of these countries to determine the outlook for resiliency and a durable regional stability. But the EU and the US, in terms of a combined strategic re-engagement, offers an important tool for us as agents of change to actually build a greater future based on the reality of a shared geography rather than closed borders and isolation. The only way forward for everyone in the region is to understand the necessity of working together, reopening borders, trade, transport, and building and forging a future, but one that is not based on any justification of the use of force. This is why it all depends on the diplomatic arena. We have moved from the battlefield to the diplomatic arena, and this is where Western engagement is precisely the answer to a Russian unilateral deployment. But in this regard, I do think that we are on the winning side. Democracy is imperiled, but will prevail. The wave of authoritarianism is unsustainable. And on that optimistic note, let me stop here.
Very much indeed. General Hodges, Ben, we are within NATO, we are in the reflection process with Jens Stoltenberg already announcing his priorities after the engagement of the reflection group as well. What is your view of future of the region? Georgia is both important partner to NATO and associated country to the EU, contributing heavily to global security. Some colleagues are much less engaged in monitoring issues of Azerbaijan, but this country was and still is very active in terms of assisting our anti-terrorist efforts. Armenia is also engaged in external security endeavors. What is your view on future of the region in this domain, in security issues?
Well, Anna, thank you. I have been encouraged to see the alliance put more emphasis into the Black Sea region lately. So that's a recognition in Brussels at NATO headquarters that this region is important to, you have to compete basically. And I do believe that great power competition prevents great power conflict, because when you compete in the diplomatic sphere, in the information sphere, and the economic sphere, not just military, you're conveying to potential adversaries that this is important to us. And because we have failed to compete in the South Caucasus in a substantial, sustained way, the Kremlin had no problem putting in troops into, they keep their troops in Armenia. They put troops into Azerbaijan, and they completely disregard their own agreement for troops that are in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, because they feel zero pressure, frankly, from Paris or Berlin, and really not much pressure from Brussels. So if we want to achieve the level of stability and security that the people that live in that region deserve, and also that is attractive to Western investment, then we have to compete there. We have to demonstrate that this area is important. And one of the most important instruments is underappreciated, I think, and that's the OSCE. The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, both in Donbass and in other places. The Kremlin, even though the Kremlin, Russia is a member of the OSCE, they absolutely do not respect the mission of the monitors, and they will only do it, I believe it, if Berlin and Paris put pressure on them. That's who has got to. I think Berlin, frankly, is the only capital that can really influence Russian behavior, and the United States has got to be consistent in support as well. The last 4 years were not helpful with the Trump administration. They were weak on the Kremlin, and the Russians knew it. And I hope that the Biden administration, even as it focuses on China, will be very, very firm on holding the Kremlin accountable, working with our European partners, especially the European Union.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm strong transatlanticist, and I think that under every administration, still U.S. is in lead in terms of putting pressure on Russia's aggressive policies. But we look forward to very strong pressure, and you are absolutely right about OSCE monitors. I was able to see it and listen to their statements, because in previous legislature we visited eastern part of Ukraine quite frequently. Actually, it was my question to Luke Coffey, because I think that in the run-up to next NATO summit, we need also not only more cooperation with partners that contribute to strong containing the posture of PRC, but also very strong attitude to our most important partners, like namely Ukraine and Georgia. When I observe a situation, I think we need still also more cooperation between both partners. Do we have a role in this, in facilitating this cooperation once more? Thank you. Hear me? So?
Yeah, sorry. I had a technical issue. I apologize for that. Yes, actually, I think it's now is a good opportunity for NATO to examine how it manages its relationships around not only the region but around the world. The reality is not every country that qualifies to become a NATO member wants to be a NATO member. Not every country that does qualify in a geographical sense can become a NATO member because of certain criteria haven't been met yet. So I think NATO needs to be very flexible in terms of how it manages its relationships, whether it's with countries in the Western Balkans who geographically qualify to become a member. Serbia is one, but does not show any meaningful desire to, or any any progress towards membership. And same Norway and Finland, they could become Finland and Sweden. Norway is fantastic NATO member. That was a slip of the tongue. Finland and Sweden, could join NATO tomorrow if they wanted to, but they choose not to. And then, of course, you have countries like the aspirant countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina, Georgia, and Ukraine, which are official candidate countries, which are on the path towards NATO membership. But for different reasons, we've been unable to get them across the finish line. And I think with this NATO 2030 initiative that the Secretary General is really pushing, and with the upcoming NATO summit, this offers an opportunity to get the issue of enlargement back on the agenda. When the group of experts submitted their report a couple of months ago, one notable omission from that report, I thought, was a focus on enlargement. It was barely discussed in this report. And I think we have stalled on this. We've entered like the enlargement quagmire. We're not making any progress. People are getting upset. There's no light at the end of the tunnel for some of these countries. So I think we need to take at least the three cases, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Ukraine, and Georgia, and instead of having this debate about membership action plan, or always lumping Ukraine and Georgia together on this journey, I think we need to have a bespoke approach for each individual country that remains to try becoming a member, and have maybe like I've called it before, a tailored action plan, because the circumstances in Bosnia, the circumstances in Ukraine, the circumstances in Georgia are also different in many ways from the circumstances that we saw with the Big Bang enlargement in the earlier part of the last decade. Membership action plan worked when we had straightforward, easy cases of enlargement. The remaining countries, it's not straightforward. So it is, in my opinion, that the U.S. should be leading inside NATO on the issue of enlargement. We need to modernize and update our processes for enlargement, and we need to, think creatively going into the future on this issue.
Thank you. Now, question to Matt Bryza. Russia gained the role of peacekeepers in Nagorno-Karabakh. All of us agree that Turkey increased most probably its role in the region. What are prospects for our greater engagement? I mean, both EU and US and Southern Caucasus becoming kind of pattern or playground for deeper, better cooperation, coordination between EU, US, and Turkey. How do you see this?
Yeah, thanks for such a strategic question. And maybe I'll focus in the beginning on Turkey. As Lieutenant Genius Hodges, who's a master of great geopolitical thinking and the micro details of logistics, which is how you win wars, had said Turkey has to play a constructive role here, has to be given a way to do that. And Petras said the same thing. And I think Ukraine is one of the key places where that can happen. As General Hodges said, there needs to be a Black Sea strategy, which we've lacked for years. And so over the course of the past several months, Turkey and Ukraine have reached a series of agreements on cooperation in military technologies. So first and foremost, Turkey's drone technologies, which played a huge role in this second Nagorno-Karabakh war, as well as in northwest Syria and Idlib, as well as in Libya, where in those last two places, they fought Russian military forces, whether it was Wagner or other Russian forces, to a standstill. And in the case of Syria, convinced Putin to sue for peace, not for peace, but for a ceasefire that saved tens of thousands of Syrian lives. So I think that's something we should focus on. You know, it's I think it's going to be difficult to get the U.S. and Turkey on track for a number of reasons, especially S-400s going back to Russia. But I think Ukraine is one area where the U.S. and EU and Turkey share a common interest in terms of constraining Russia's military adventurism in the Black Sea, A2AD, whatever you want to call it. I think we also have a chance to work together also with the OSCE and the Minsk group to do something Luke Coffey had long ago, well, not long ago, but weeks ago, months ago, suggested, which is focus the Minsk group, among other things, on multilateralizing or multinationalizing the peacekeeping force, the Russian peacekeeping force in Nagorno-Karabakh. My view is that in the immediate aftermath of the war, there was no other peacekeeping contributing country available other than Russia at that moment, because it all unfolded really quickly, and there needed to be a significant military presence there to separate Armenian and Azerbaijani forces. And so far, it's worked out well. But all of us here talking today know how nefariously the Russian peacekeepers have behaved in Moldova and in Georgia. And having been at the center of what happened in 2008 on the U.S. government side, I will go to my grave 100% convinced that Russia provoked that war using its peacekeepers, and that's a topic for another day. One last place where there is urgent need for and space for the U.S. and EU and OSCE and everyone to work together is going back to what Petras said. Looking at the November 10th, if you want to call it a statement or an agreement, November 9th. Yes, Moscow led the negotiations. But you could say Moscow imposed it, as Richard was also saying. But the fundamental content of that agreement or statement is what was agreed preliminarily by both Armenia and Azerbaijan in January of 2009, arcanely called the Madrid Principles, which I know well because I helped negotiate them or write them. What those called for was a settlement of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict based on a lands for peace formula. So Azerbaijan will regain its occupied lands, and the Armenians who will remain living in Nagorno-Karabakh, they will remain there. They get security, they get peace. And then it also called for the reopening of all the transit corridors. There's my dog. Reopening of all the transit corridors. And a peacekeeping force. Now, we never foresaw a Russian peacekeeping force. So that's why we have to go back to Luke's point. We need a multilateral force, and we need to get there step by step. My final point is what's not part of the November 9 and 10 statement or agreement that was part of the Madrid Principles was that there could be a change in the legal status of Nagorno-Karabakh. That if you go back and look at the ceasefire agreements negotiated or agreed on October 10th of last year, and then another statement in Paris, another one in the US, they all made reference to basic principles or the basic principles. What that meant was the possible legal status being changed for Nagorno-Karabakh was on the table the whole time. It only went away once the war ended after Azerbaijan regained Shusha. So I'm getting too far down in the details, but what I'm saying is that the more or less the agreement that has been signed by Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia is what Armenia and Azerbaijan had previously agreed as negotiated by the Minsk group, except for the status question. So the status question is going to be an open wound out there for a long time. Azerbaijan is going to say, war is over, we're not going to negotiate it. Armenia is going to say the opposite. That still must be negotiated. So that's somewhere where we really need to focus our efforts as well. Last point, sorry, on Georgia. I'm an eternal optimist. And yeah, the situation is really tense. The cancellation of the Anaklia Port project was a disaster for the reasons we heard, especially from General Hodges, a disaster. But also, I think yesterday there was a court decision by the Georgian judiciary saying that essentially a telecommunications project called Caucasus Online, where I am an advisor, I will tell you, maybe can go ahead. It was being blocked, and it seemed like that blockage was a dirty trick that was in keeping with a desire to cancel East-West integrative projects like Anaklia Port. But yesterday, the Georgian court said, looks like that project can go forward. To me, that gives me a little bit more confidence that hopefully this EU mediation effort with Ambassador Danielson can gain some traction and we can de-escalate that Georgian political crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. I haven't heard about this ruling. It's really good news. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have Andrius Kubilius, former Prime Minister of Lithuania, very important in terms of supporting Eastern Partnership countries, and South Caucasus, of course, is extremely important from this point of view as well. Andrius, floor is yours. We conclude with your remarks.
Diana, thanks a lot. It's a big privilege, really. I was not planning to be, responsible for concluding, but really, thanks a lot for giving me the floor. And what I was listening to, unfortunately, for some period of time, I needed to switch to another meeting. But really, what I have heard, it's absolutely what I think is really most important. And thanks to our transatlantic colleagues, Ambassador Bryza, whom I know very well, I agree absolutely with a lot of his comments about the region, including Georgian political crisis and so on and so on. And I think that really it's a time very important for transatlantic community to come back and to be much more present in the region. And I am always, complaining, being here in European Parliament, that EU, which likes to talk about strategic autonomy, which sometimes, I think is not very clear what we are talking about. I am complaining that EU should talk not about strategic autonomy, but about its own strategic responsibility for the neighborhood region, about strategic leadership, bringing really stability, peace, and development in the region. And that is where I think, since I am leading so-called Euronest Parliamentary Assembly delegation, which is taking care about our Eastern partners from EU point of view, I think that EU policy, enlargement policy, again, could be adapted to the needs of this region. We are coming with some kind of new ideas or new old ideas about economic integration and so on. And that is really what is most important, looking to next decade. I hope that we can really be much more proactive as European Union, as a Western community in this region, where the development of the region towards European or transatlantic integration would be also of major assistance to Russian people, to Russia itself. Since I have, in European Parliament, I have two hats, or two chairs. One is Euronest, another one is I am standing rapporteur on Russia. And when I see, how things are developing in Russia, which are in some way following what had happened in Belarus, I hope that democracy in Belarus at the end also will win. I see really some kind of major, what I call tectonic shifts in the region, where really EU and NATO and transatlantic, policy is very much needed. Is very much needed, and so that's my very simple, message. Thanks a lot, Anna, for this very interesting discussion. And thanks a lot to our transatlantic partners. Both us together. I think that we can do a lot, and perspective for the region, despite all the problems which we see now, some wars, some tragic developments. But nevertheless, when I'm looking into several next decades, I see exactly this perspective, that the region will become much more integrated, will become much more stable, and it can have, also major impact on transformation of Russia. And maybe I am naive, maybe I am romantic, but I still believe, or I believe always, I believed and still I am believing that democracy is possible also in Russia. Thanks a lot, Anna.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you for those remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank all of you for this fascinating exchange of views. Always good to listen to our American friends, our transatlantic partners, and in particular to our colleagues in the region. I would like to thank Commissioner, particularly Commissioner Oliver Varhelyi, for his introductory remarks. Our thoughts are with Ambassador Toivo Klar, now in the region, currently consulting with President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev. I would like particularly to thank Ambassador Matt Bryza, Mr. Luke Coffey, General Ben Hodges, Mr. Richard Giragosian, and our Georgian friend, Dr. Tornike Gordadze, for their valuable, very deep contributions. We look forward to transatlantic cooperation to the benefit of Southern Caucasus. Thank you.
Thank you very much.